Start recording.
Yeah, I ran into it. A couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, last week maybe. I don't know.
I gotta grab my iced coffee. Hang on.
Hey, Abby. Oh yeah, that's a good call.
Look around, look around. Let me get my show notes. All right. Get my crap out of the way from the video. Hey, Draco. Hey, buddy. You're not going to assault me, are you? Draco coming in and leaving a little treat in the litter box while I'm recording. Wonderful.
You going to get your coffee reminded me that I should pee before the show, because I think a couple of weeks ago I had to, towards the end of the show, I was like, gotta go.
Oh, is that what you disappeared to?
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. So, docs.
Hello?
Hey, Nick.
Oh my goodness, these last few days have been packed.
That's weird. Why do I get this thing on a screen that says Nick is talking? Where did that come from?
It's default Zoom functionality.
And I see Jacob, but I hear Nick. There he is.
You can see me now too.
Now you see Jacob and you see Nick.
Do you hear me? No?
Yes, we can now.
All right. I can also switch to AirPods if it's not great audio. You know, it just
good.
depends.
Audio sounds great.
These are cheap, $6 headset, but they've worked great for years.
We are recording already, just so everybody knows we're recording already.
But you're going to edit this, right?
We do edit it. We try to do as little editing as possible, but we take what we call the raw feed without the edits and give it to patrons. But if there's anything we need to cut out, sometimes there is. We do cut it out.
Yeah, don't worry. Everybody knows. Like the last show or the show before, I had to run out of the room because I had to use the bathroom because I didn't before the show recorded. So that's what I was talking about before you get on. So don't.
Yeah.
Have no fear.
I'm just cleaning my office up to make it nice and pretty.
Even though I will always, lower the bar for everybody else, I guess.
Yeah. And give me a second. I'm going to set this up so you can. Yep. I look directly at the camera because that's just a better way to do it. And
Nick, adjust your camera.
Ta-da!
It's a 2i.
Yep. Just put your head a little bit more.
Oh, nice Legos.
Thanks. Yeah, so is that like Lego behind you, or is that Connects?
You know what? What I have is a mass collection of Transformers because my kid turned 14 and they were sitting in a box. So I have I love doing this. I get on calls with little kids and I take out Bumblebee and I'm showing them the little action figure and transforming it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's fun. And I have a Kermit the Frog that I had since I was a kid. So, yeah, I saved the Transformers from falling apart in his drawer.
Okay, I'm gonna start recording now too.
Great.
So I just record a backup.
All right, I'm gonna turn off my video for 1 second.
Yep,
I'll be back.
So we have a hard stop at 5, John. Right? Is that today?
Yeah,
okay. We can do it.
It could be 5:10 or 5:15.
No, we'll just shoot for 5.
I don't want to cut the conversation short.
Okay.
One more second.
Yeah, this week has been one of those weeks. A lot of very high pressure bug fixes that I had to do for several different clients, but finally got most of them wrapped up. So,
I'll throw some initials in front of these things here. So,
okay, now I'm 100%.
John.
Yeah, it looks good.
See, what I thought was interesting is if you're using Zoom, I can actually share my screen and just start showing things, but then that cheats all the people who are listening on their phones.
Yes, that's what we have to be careful with. Yep.
Also, don't shut your camera off. I found out the hard way a couple of weeks ago that is not good.
What, people get upset or?
No.
Steven
the editor gets upset when he puts the little names in the lower thirds later, and then halfway through the show, he has to start moving them around. Because when you shut your camera off and turn it back on, you end up in a different spot on the screen.
Oh. Yeah, I have not seen your video recordings, because I just go through the podcasts on my phone.
Because it's a podcast, and Apple makes it so easy.
Yeah, and I can speed it up if I'm short on time.
Yep.
You can do that for YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I forget. Yeah. But then that seems awkward.
Maybe I'll do the intro at 2x speed today, and then it'll be like 4x if you speed it up. This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development with a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal.
Brilliant.
Try that 5 times.
Nope. I'm not even sure I could do that again.
I mean, a lot of the podcasts, one of the podcasts I listened to, I put it on, I think, almost 2x. And the people talk so slow and normally that it just sounds like normal talking.
It's interesting. Chris Wells, couple of the last times I talked to him, he was talking about different podcasts. I guess he listens to his podcasts at either 2x or 3x, like in the car. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, you get used to it after a while. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like, I mean, I guess I've heard that. I've heard other people say that too, but I don't know. You might even go up to 4x, you really do. But I'm not really sure.
Fastest I've ever gone is 2x, I think. It gets hard to follow after that.
So, Jacob, do you have any questions about the notes here or anything?
No, you know what? I was shutting down things to be smart about not having Slack going, and then I realized I should open my notes. And the show notes seem fine to me. I mean, we've done this before. Yep. This is not a new thing, so I feel really comfortable. Good. And yeah, I think talking about the 3 features, and I think works really well because it's kind of what I've been working on in the pandemic. So that's a good way, to do it. And we can talk about more of whatever feature I understand why the sharing is the most interesting thing to talk about right now. So we could start with that.
Yeah, I think they're all, your blog posts were really good. I love the way you do your posts and then have the video demo to back up the text.
Because I'm one of those newfangled folks that doesn't read the text and just watches the video.
Yeah,
it targets 2 different type of approaches. I'm going to read the text, or I just want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, "Oh, these videos are like 5 minutes each." Okay, cool. I'm going to watch this. I'm like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah. I did.
I like that because I hate when it's just a video because finding something again is really difficult. Mm-hmm. But the videos are short enough that you can really watch it, and then if you need to refresh something, you can just read. And you can also read the blog post to see if the video you're looking at is the one that you want to watch again. It's super helpful. Yeah,
I'm probably going to keep that approach on any feature I add.
Yeah, it works great. All right, let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Rocking
John
and rolling.
John's got the helm today, so just give a pause before you start speaking. Makes it easy for me, and then whenever you're ready.
This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 254, Jacob and Webform. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Webform was one of those modules that seemed abandoned on Drupal 7 until Jacob Rockowitz stepped in. Since then, Webform has not stopped evolving. Jacob joins us today to talk about the most recent advancements. I'm John Picozzi. Before we talk with Stephen and Nick, let's meet Jacob.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. So, Jacob Rockowitz, you are the you are building and maintaining the Webform module for Drupal 8 and 9. You're a Drupal community leader, an advocate for open source, a visionary for open source sustainability. You were born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and lives there today with his wife and 2 children. And unfortunately, you got COVID-19 right before the peak in New York. What's the PSA on that?
I know. I thought that was a good thing. When you mentioned New York, I was like, with everything going on, I thought it was worth just bringing up. Yeah, we picked up. My wife works at Whole Foods, and she picked it up at the job, came home with it, and that shit's very contagious. Sorry to curse, but that's very contagious stuff. That's the biggest PSA. Is it's not something to mess around with. We were very fortunate. And I mean, I know. I think it's like 20% of New Yorkers came down with. So I know a couple of people, and generally, you can get over it without going to the hospital, but it is so ridiculously contagious that everyone in the house got it. And for me, it was like 2 days of feeling really stiff and just achy chest pains without the scary side of the scary breathing issues, which I think is what is a problem for certain people, especially with, I can't even imagine if you have any pre-existing health conditions, how hard it is to recover from this. And I guess the PSA is take it seriously. And like it's really weird to be in New York now, and New York is kind of recovering from this first phase, and the rest of the country is going through it.
So you would advise people to wear their damn masks?
Oh my God, yeah, that to me is the no-brainer. That's the one that even took me. I was a little stubborn, and I was like, no, that's the one where you're just not causing it to spread around. And I also think I would not go to a bar or a large social gathering. Like my etiquette is I only hang out with people I know. And if I'm going to not social distance, like it's family or friends, the policy is, if you get sick, tell me. So I can, slow down for a second for 2 weeks and make sure I'm not going to spread it. But I can't imagine going to an event where you don't know anyone, or it's like you're at a concert or a bar or yes, I'm like many New Yorkers, I'm hesitant to ride the subway right now.
Or Whole Foods.
Yeah, that one's a tricky. That's like that. We are a calculated risk. That is everyone's got their little bubbles, and then we have a job. My wife's there, and she's got to do her job. And my brother-in-law is a firefighter, and he's got to do his job. Yeah. But it's 30 guys in a house together. And if one gets sick, they tell each other. So you're avoiding the subway. Oh, yeah.
Are you're doing more biking?
Yeah, that's like so I love biking in the city, and now I've got my 11-year-old kid. She's trailing along with me. I took her out at 6 a.m. I took her out 2 days in a row at 6 a.m. into Manhattan to ride around. And what's crazy is I don't have very eventful rides, but in the last 2 days we saw there was a protest at City Hall, Occupy City Hall, and the cops were cracking down on them. And it was turning into like a mob scene as we're riding by with like a wall of cops. And I don't think it got as bad as it seemed when I saw it. And then this morning we got to see a collapsed building in Brooklyn, which is all over the news.
Oh, wow.
So
it's a rare sight.
Is she riding in front or in back?
Both. And I'm teaching her how to kind of be street smart about it and, understand, I don't know, how the traffic works. What's good is at 6 a.m, there's not a lot of traffic. And then by 7, it starts to pick up. So she's kind of getting used to it. And what's great is there's a lot of bike lanes and they're opening up more. So it's as safe as it can be. And compared to when I was a kid, like I have an injury on my finger from riding in the city because there were no lanes. And like I hit a cab and that was it. My finger just got destroyed.
It's something I understand. My 7-year-old is actually riding his bike now more, and he took off his training wheels, this year, and so he's been tooling around on his bike, and same sort of deal. I mean, we live in the woods. We don't live anywhere near near a major city like New York, but so it's a little bit different, but still, the back roads around here, people tend to drive a pretty good clip, and a car is a car, no matter if it's in a city or in the woods. So, I can understand that. I do, most of the time I keep him in front of me, but sometimes he lags behind. So that's super interesting. And I can understand the biking. The New York City aspect is like, that feels intense to me, but you have lived there your whole life, so you're probably used to it, right?
Yeah, I ride into Midtown for meetings and I literally ride up to Grand Central Station on my bike and I've done it long enough that I've had enough accidents that I don't care. I just accept the risks. And
there you go. Reasonable risk, right?
There's
a risk on the subway.
Go about it.
It's a new title of the show: Reasonable Risk with Webforms.
Yeah.
So, Steven, what's going on with you?
Hey, not too much. It's funny, when we finished recording the last show, I think we're going to get into this in one of our stories too, though. We realized that Drupal made an announcement the next day, so I had to put like a little PSA in front of the video and the audio for the episode.
It was lovely, by the way.
Yeah.
Was it? What was funny about it, and why I'm bringing it up, is that morning, before I recorded that little PSA, I did it in video too, for the video side of the show. And I realized that I didn't have my baseball hat on like I always do, right? And I gave myself my third coronavirus haircut on that day. So I've gone with the shave it all look, which I haven't done for years. So
I bought one of those.
So this one, the other ones were more stylish. And then last Saturday, I just decided, enough with this, taking too much time to style it myself. So I just went with it.
Also better hope that his kids keep going to college, so he has a supply of hats to wear.
Yeah, I don't know if that's my new ASU hat, right? But what's nice about this hat is this hat isn't costing me $130,000, right? This one is free for me. So
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, and that's it for me this week.
Cool. Nick, how about you?
So just got a couple things. So listeners of the show have probably heard my old chair breaking down, and last weekend was my birthday, so my wife bought me a brand new chair, and it might sound like I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's so much more comfortable, but one of the cool things I did is I got one of those rollerblade caster wheels sets too. It is so quiet. It's so much easier to move around in it. I actually kind of like slide away from my desk sometimes if I don't have my feet down. So I'm enjoying it.
Nick, did she get that for you after I sent you the note that says, could you please oil your chair before the next recording?
Before. I actually got it the day after you sent me that message, but got it in the mail to put together, but she purchased it before. And then I just got a couple of quick shout outs. I'm doing a lot of, a little bit topical, but I've been doing a lot of web form work with a client. And this particular client, they needed web form autosave, and they have a significant number of web forms on a page. It's kind of like a pseudo e-learning situation. And so we've been doing a lot of work to add some multiple web form Ajax functionality to the web form autosave module. And Ryan McVeigh, who's the maintainer, worked with me this week to get them all, most of them committed to the module. So now people that are using that module can work with multiple web forms as well. And then, I can't give a web form related shout out without also giving one to Jay Rockowitz. I opened a bug that we noticed.
Yeah. How many bugs? You opened at least 3, but which bug?
Yeah. But one of them I opened, and within 2 hours, you had put a patch up. Well, you had responded and put a patch up for it ignoring the scroll to top of form function, I think, on Ajax.
Well, that also goes to show you, if you have a recognizable username and contribute something to the community, people recognize that and go, oh, it's Nick. I'm going to just go fix this, because why wouldn't I? May as well put this to the top of the list and, help him get his project done. So, I appreciate I do that for people that I recognize, and people do it for me. And that is really awesome sometimes when I'm have an issue and I just open it in their queue, and like within a few days, they're like, yeah, I'll take care of it. Makes a huge difference.
I very much appreciate it. And I mean, my client was very impressed with the quick turnaround. So yeah, it's very much appreciated.
So what's up with you, John?
Just another sales pitch for Drupal right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tirade right now because I'm kind of annoyed. So for for years, probably at least the last 10, I've been trying to get a domain name, Pacosi.com, right? My last name. And for, say the last 10 years, it's been owned by a company in Italy. They have been, not really using it. Nothing lives there. They've just owned it and whatever, maybe rightfully so, maybe not, who knows? Well, recently I was looking into it and I noticed that, the domain registration had changed and it wasn't associated with that person or company in Italy anymore. So I said, oh, that's interesting. And, I went to go try to buy it. And it said, hey, this is a premium domain. You can buy this domain for $7,500. And I said, what? Now, to be fair, I had previously made bids on this domain through various services to say like, hey, I will pay X number of dollars for this domain more than like the regular registration because like I really want it. Definitely not $7,500. Well, come to find out, looking at the Whois information, it's registered to a company called New Venture Services Corp. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, I called a couple of people, namely Network Solutions and Registered.com. And I was like, so I see on your website that this domain is $7,500. And I was wondering, like, is there any way that I can, like, talk to whoever owns it or represents this company to be able to like try to negotiate with them? And they were like, oh, well, we don't know who that is. Well, come to find out, New Venture Services Corp is a shell company that Network Solutions and Register.com, as well as a couple of other services, use to house their domain names. And they are a house for premium. If you can't see me because you're not on the video, I'm air quoting that, premium domain names. So, I called around a little bit and I was like, okay, guys. And the last person I talked to at Register.com, I was like, listen, everything on the internet says that this company is a shell company for you guys so that you can kind of like jack up the domain price. Like, I don't mind paying more, but I'm definitely not paying $7,500. And they were like, yeah, there's not really anything we can do. So I was like, okay, cool. Thank you. I'm going to go out to the internet and complain, which I'm doing now. And don't worry, I'll get off my soapbox. My soapbox shortly. But how totally messed up is it that these two companies are basically squatting on domains and nobody's doing anything about it?
I have to say, I'm a little surprised that you're just realizing that that's how it works.
Welcome to the 90s.
I'm not just realizing it, but it seems like basically they're using the data that, oh, hey, there's somebody interested in this domain.
Yes.
Let's jack it up to $7,500.
Well, right now on Hover it's listed at $8,375. So
I use
the
Hover.
more people that's looking at it, the more it's going up.
No. So that's the thing. Hover needs to get their cut because Hover doesn't own it.
No, right.
So if you buy it from Network Solutions at $7,500 because their shell company owns it, Hover's just trying to make a dime, which
you have to be careful too, because some of them do it by escrow. So like you don't actually get ownership. You end up paying $7,500 a year. Like I had a client that recently was trying to purchase a 4-letter domain. It wasn't a word. It wasn't like, it was just like an acronym. And they said they wanted like $35,000 to $50,000 for it.
Also reading on this a little bit more, come to find out that those registrars that I mentioned earlier, Network Solutions and Register.com, I guess apparently will just either forget to send you notices or the notices get lost in the mail that your domains expire.
Yeah.
And then when it expires, boop, up. Now New Venture Services owns it and you have to actually pay them to get your domain back. This is absolutely criminal. somebody should do something about it. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
The last thing I'll say about that, there is something done about that. It's actually a lot easier to recover things like that now than it used to. I mean, it's still not easy. And I think it generally takes a lawsuit, but you can win those lawsuits now, whereas 10 years ago you couldn't.
Subsequently, anybody that works for, again, air quotes, New Venture Services Corp, they want to sell me the domain that I want to buy for a reasonable price. I will negotiate. Just saying. Not that I feel like I should have to. I should just be able to buy it like any other domain, but I'll play the game.
The problem is that it's too cheap. It's so cheap for them to keep it because they're the top level registrar. So they keep hundreds of thousands of domains a year because they sell 2% of them for more than $50. They're making money.
All right. Now that I'm done with my tirade, let's jump into our primary topic. And, we're here with Jacob. Jacob is the guy for Webforms. If you've ever been to a DrupalCon or a conference, you know that he's the guy, right? But Jacob, there's so many options in Drupal for collecting data via forms. Can you give us the elevator pitch for Webforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Drupal 8, there's really two options right now that stand out. There's the contact form module in core and web form module. And the contact form module in core, it leverages Drupal's entity and field API to build forms. And that's powerful because we use fields to build our nodes. But there's a performance limit because having a form with 100 fields on it can start hitting some bottlenecks. And if you have when this discussion came up, if you have hundreds of forms with hundreds of fields, you hit a performance bottleneck because it becomes too complex. And my argument there is that the field API system was meant to it wasn't meant to just collect data. It was meant to build a website, to build systems and architect systems, and specifically to build content. Versus web forms, which is really meant to be a form that someone fills out and collects data. So it's a form builder and submission manager. That's the elevator pitch of web forms. And it's meant to just have front end facing forms to your users that they can, fill out an application, hit submit. And then we collect that data and we will send emails with the data, distribute the data through remote posts, and then you can download it. So it's a much more focused system. And the comparisons of other tools on the market, it's like SurveyMonkey, JotForm. These are tools where you build forms and that's it. That's the goal. And get the data. That's the best elevator pitch I can give you for the Webform module. The only other aspect of that is, for me in Drupal 8 and 9, the focus is on the forms. It's building incredibly powerful and flexible forms. Like that's the first and foremost thing of the functionality when you get there. And lots of features are around that user experience. I think we're going to start talking about features that I've added that are really about the form side of things.
So you spent the last few months under quarantine working on some key features, and you've highlighted 3 of them in your recent blog post since like January. So we thought today we'd hit each one of those primary features and maybe some other things as well. So why don't we start with, and these are in no particular order, I don't think. Maybe it was the interest to me when I was going through the features. So first one is sharing of web forms. That post that you put out really caught my eye because it's really disconnecting the form from the Drupal backend in some way. So what is sharing of a web form about?
Well, it's simply taking a form and allowing it to be embedded in an iframe on any website. And it was a feature request from my main client, Memorial Sloan Kettering. And when you say embed something in an iframe, you're like, oh, that's a horrible user experience. There's going to be scroll bars. It's going to be awkward. And it took me a month or two of some time just researching, thinking about it, looking at how other people are doing it, and realized a lot of products, a lot of form builders, including stuff coming from Salesforce or HubSpot, they allow you to embed it using an iframe. And what the approach is, it's a dynamically resizing iframe. So essentially taking Drupal and creating this little window on your site and the form is just sitting in that window, running in that iframe. But if the form resizes, the iframe resizes. So it kind of creates a seamless user experience. And I got to say, one of the benefits of iframes is that it doesn't get into conflicts with CSS and JavaScript from another person's website or application. And that's pretty, the sharing is kind of tied to, embedding a web form using an iframe. I got to do a shout out. I think I'm using the iframe resizer library, and I really wish I had the maintainer's name right in front of me. But it's this amazing library that makes it possible to have that iframe resize perfectly. It has a lot to do with having JavaScript on the client who's embedding the iframe, and then in the back end web form, so that the two communicate with each other. And I think this feature opens up a lot of opportunities for headless CMS, headless implementations of Drupal, because a lot of people are going headless, where they're building, they have a front-end framework where they're building their site, and this allows web forms to still exist in that system, because you can have your web forms running in Drupal and embed them inside your headless CMS. And what's nice is you can pick and choose whatever theme you want for the embedded web forms, and I don't think people have to do a lot of work to get that user experience working perfectly. I really think a lot of out-of-box themes have great form support. So you can, build your site.
So is it, I guess the question on the person creating the form side, is it kind of like you say embed this form somewhere and you get the iframe there, or is it more that it just generates, there's just like a JavaScript file that like renders the form once the page loads and replaces some snippet? Like what approach did you take on that side?
I took 3 approaches, and I really sat down and said, I want to use this library and make sure, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want someone who's mastered the art of embedding iframes. So there's 3 ways to copy the code snippet. It's a line of JavaScript, and I'll laugh. A little funny thing is, you put this JavaScript in, and all it's doing is document writing, which is old school. Mm-hmm. Basically the iframe resizer JavaScript, the iframe, and then the initiation code, which is like, make this iframe resizable. The other snippet you can do is you can just cut and paste those 3 lines of code into your site. And I also did it that way so that people understand that, like, we're just using a third-party library, and you can actually add some custom options to the resizing behavior. You can say how you want it to resize. What's great is that library worked perfectly out of the box. So I did not explore a lot of the options, but it gives people full control. They're like, I am embedding this web form. The key thing I had to work on was creating an endpoint where the web form just renders as a simple single web page where there's no header or footer. It's actually, I spent a lot of time on the code to make sure it's very performant. It doesn't render any of the blocks on the page. It like suppresses all the block rendering and just renders the web form.
Is this David Bradshaw? Is that the name of the?
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay. You looked it up? Thank you. Yeah, I'm talking, so I don't want to start typing, right, but yeah. I gave him a little cup of coffee. I think that's how he's doing his fundraising.
Okay.
For his contribution.
So Jacob, what are the uses? Do you have anybody who's using this, and what are the key use cases that you've seen for this?
I mean, if you're headless, I think that's definitely a use case. If you have a form that you want partners to use and to embed on their site, this gives you that opportunity to be like, here's a registration form you can put on your intranet and have an embedded user experience.
It's a great use case for that headless experience, right? To be able to say, hey, this form's headless. All the data is going to go back to Drupal, and then we can use views to develop reports and kind of provide you some sort of method to export that data easily or view that data in a certain way, right? On the through a Drupal view or admin.
It also competes with all the other form builders on the market. They all do it. It's really, I'm trying to get these features to be competitive, and like all of them do that. You build your form and you can embed it on your site, and that opens up. I mean, a lot of ways, it might be worth some companies to explore setting up a simple Drupal instance with just web forms, as a form builder and submission manager. That's it.
I will say it is super exciting as we look at more headless options and building more sites with Gatsby. It's really interesting to be able to have to not rely on something like Wufoo or some sort of service to provide web forms, to be able to say, oh, we have, we can build out a Drupal instance that'll provide you with, a store for your web form data and, the ability to, run reports on it, do those things that you typically do in the Drupal admin. So it's definitely a great use case.
Yeah, and I'll just point out for security, you can have a Drupal website and a web form website and lock down that web form website. Like if you're doing PHI or any type of real data that you want to make sure you're limiting access to it, that becomes a possibility.
Jacob, possibility as a software as a service application coming from you in the future?
No. I think that market, that is such a crowded market because I research all the form builders out there that I don't want to get into. I'm competing at it simply by being able to provide a really solid open source solution that is as flexible as possible. But I think the SaaS-based, that is such a crowded market. And there are some good players. I have to say, I've seen some great SaaS-based solutions.
So outside of using Webform, in your research, what would you say if someone was looking for a third party, which products would you recommend they take a look at?
I mean, there's a bunch of like big players, which are like SurveyMonkey, JotForm is the biggest one. That's been around forever. I really like Cognito Forms, which is a very small player in the market, but they have a great form builder. It's very intuitive and flexible. The one I will give a shout out to, because they're also open source and they came from the Drupal community, is Form.io. So they're like JavaScript powered forms, and their architecture is kind of meant to have these forms embedded in any type of front end application. Like they've thought of it that way. So you can get a React component, like that you build the form and then you have a component to embed it in a React app. And that component allows some interaction with it. I think they're a huge player. Form.io, like their approach is the right one, and it's all open source. I think it's Node.js in the back end, and I also think that's a really brilliant approach to have Node.js in the back end and JavaScript in the front end. That means when you start writing custom form logic, it works in both places. Right. I mean that's a huge, very powerful model. I almost feel like Drupal is going to have to start thinking about getting some JavaScript in the back end at some point.
Very cool. So the next thing, next big ticket item that I think you've been working on is something called Webform cards.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So it's to address. So let's step back and they say there's a challenge in Drupal is that the form API is pretty old. It's been around for 15 years. The current iteration I kind of estimated is like 10 years old. So it's and the blog post I wrote about Webform cards, the concept behind Form API was that you'd have a form, you'd render the form, and when someone hits submit, it goes to the server, it validates the form, and if there's errors, it re-renders the form and sends it back. This creates a performance bottleneck, especially on multi-step forms, because every single page request has to hit the server and come back. Right. Even with Ajax enabled, you can see the lag. You can see it taking some time. And I have to build this form for MSK where it's a lot of steps, like 30 different steps. Basically, it's one question per page. And that doesn't work with each page. When you hit submit, goes back to the server. So I started to explore moving the behavior of paging between pages, which I'm calling cards, all to the client side using JavaScript. And client-side validation, which is there's a client. I love every feature has some module or someone in the open source community providing me with the essential functionality. And there's a client-side validation module, which I kind of set up integration with, where you can have I'm calling it cards because cards to me feel like a deck that you're flipping through really quick.
I was actually thinking when you were saying it and I watched the video, I'm like, it's like index cards. You're just going from one to the other, like super quickly. And and then at the end you're done and you submit it,
Yeah, and I copied some of the word Jotform is using cards, and they came out with very similar functionality. And what they said was they did some user research, and when you have certain forms where one question per page that auto forwards, where you're like just asking yes or no questions or options, and people just click a button and it moves to the next page, there's a higher response rate because people can just click through faster. And I definitely see that being much faster on mobile devices because you're just looking at your screen and clicking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If there's a text field, you enter it, you hit enter, and it goes to the next page. And yeah, that was my hope with building the feature. What else? Yeah, that's. I mean, and I'm optimistic that this will solve a lot of problems with multi-step forms for people. And I actually wrote code to convert existing wizard in the Webform module. There's wizard pages, which is where it goes from one page to another by hitting the server, and you can convert your forms to use cards and see the.
So how does intercard logic work? Because one of the things that one of my clients is working on, and unfortunately we couldn't do it in Webform, we're using one of those companies that provides a form. We're making it into a pseudo multi-step. Our approach for this was to just render the form and then make it a pseudo multi-step form, where we're just putting the cards together using JavaScript and then going through them. Because we needed to have some conditional logic between cards, like we skip certain cards depending on what responses are given.
Okay.
Does Webform cards handle that kind of logic, or?
Yes, and we're doing exactly what you just described. So we're rendering the entire form with pseudo paging back and forth. What that allows you to do is then put those there's full conditional logic support. Like I couldn't demo it because it gets a little too crazy to be like, okay, you have like trying to create hypothetical conditional logic to show people. But if you have a form with conditional logic and you have a progress bar showing the number of steps or the percentage, as the conditional logic is triggered, that progress bar is dynamically updated. So full conditional logic. I even added this crazy feature, which was like, it's more of an experimentation. So you have, let's say you have a form with like 30 steps. Some users just don't want to click the steps. You can add a show all cards link to your form, which will then show you every single card. And it literally just renders out the full form. Like that pseudo, it's basically saying, yeah, this is a pseudo fake behavior where, yeah, we have all the entire forms there. And yeah, it all supports front end conditional logic that came with, that's Drupal states, the pound states API. And yeah, I'm going to do the same thing for MSK. I have to do conditional logic.
I can see Nick spending all night now rewriting this functionality for this client so he can use.
No, that won't be happening. But it validates the design, the architecture decisions we made. There's other reasons why it wasn't done in web forms in the first place, but it's good to know that we arrived at the same kind of process.
Most people are doing that, sending the whole form to the client, because it's just the browsers can handle that. They might not send the whole rendered HTML form. They might send the data packet and then render each page individually. But you don't want to go back to the server for that stuff.
And I imagine these two things work together, right? The web forms anywhere and the web form cards.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It works really well together. I actually spent time when you have a validation error, it will shake the card, which I just think is a really cool behavior. It just goes, it just like does a little vibration. And I actually spent time being like, well, when you're embedding it in an iframe, I want to make sure it doesn't break the margins when it shakes. So it looks seamless.
I think this is a good time to mention that these three features that we're talking about, Jacob has written blog posts that are linked in the show notes for each of these features, and along with a narrative written description of what this feature does, he also has a short demo for you as well in a video, so you can really get a good feel for what each of these things does. It's very helpful. In the Webform cards video, you talk about the analogy to infinity and beyond. Maybe you could touch on that for a minute here.
Well, it's going back to that whole issue. Like, this is a pseudo feature. We're kind of faking what a lot of front end, like if Webforms was using a front end framework to render forms, or Drupal, let's back up. If Drupal was fully compatible with React and we were building our forms in React, it would be a different approach, because then all the logic would be in JavaScript and we could kind of work from that approach. And I think it's a huge challenge in the Drupal community. Like I know Form API really well, and it's starting to show its age, as well as it's incredibly robust. I mean, what we're capable of doing with it is just outstanding. And I use the analogy to be like, this feature really fixes something and creates the right user experience, but we still have some issues still floating there. We still have some old code. And I'm not really sure how to fix it's a really big challenge. I mentioned in the blog post, there's the admin modernization initiative in the Drupal community and the JavaScript modernization.
Right.
And I want to do a shout out to say we have this amazing new admin theme, Claro, which even though I'm not using it in all my videos, I use it every day. Like that's my default admin theme. And it's just a cleaner, high contrast, accessible user experience. And with that, we're trying to improve the JavaScript so that the admin experience is using React. And I guess for non-technical people, it just is fast. And right, I mean, that's the whole goal, is to create a modern experience, and modern experiences are zippy beyond. Yeah.
I think one of the
gets upset at fast websites, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing that React provides that maybe not people that haven't used it don't know is really, really complex form elements are much easier to do with React. So like things like a select list that you drop down, and when you select the first option, opens up some checkboxes that you can check off. Like a compound element like that in React is, those components exist and you kind of just implement them and provide the information. Whereas doing something like that in Drupal, usually you just architect it so you don't have such a complex form element.
And one of the challenges I have is like, yes, we have the form elements, but then we just have the back end logic, like submission limits and these, I don't know what to call the form processing features. And we almost have to figure out how to decouple the two things or the two concepts.
So we promised everybody 3 new features, and the last one that we want to talk about, or have you tell us about, is Webform variants. What are those, and how would somebody use those?
That is a enterprisey feature, to use a word like that. Is the concept of variants is sometimes you need to make some general tweak to a form. You can do tweaks to a form in conditional logic. You could have a hidden field and say the type of user is a customer or an employee, and I'm going to change and hide some fields. That's kind of a hacky solution. And what variants allow you to do is set a parameter where you're like, when the form's rendered, you're saying this form is for, in my case, it was for companies. So for company A and company B. And for company A and B, they both need the same form, except I need to change a few labels on the form. Or I need to ask only certain questions for company A or company B. And frankly, it scales to hundreds of companies where you could have the same web form, and then you're basically setting up minor variations of the web form for each company. And by the way, the simple example is you're changing the name of like, are you an employee of company A or company B? With that said, when I say A and B, it also gets into the opportunity to do A and B testing, variations of a form. And the example would be you might want to test this completion rate of, I don't know, whether drop down versus radios. And that opens up that option. And it's actually really easy. You can go in and just change one little element and say, let's use radio buttons instead of a select menu here. And what I recommend doing is using some analytics software just to track the completion rate. And then you'll know which variant works. And it's actually built in where you can say, I want to apply the variant A or B to the form, and you're done with your A/B testing. The only other so I broke it down to 3 aspects of variance. So we had A/B testing, segmentation, and segmentation is kind of saying company A or company B. You're segmenting your users based on the type of users. And then there's a crazy option, which I'm not using, but you can actually use it to personalize your web forms. Create literally, like the example would be, you want to have a form where I'm going to go with a patient metaphor. A patient is going to this form, and you want to personalize it and have a drop-down menu saying which lab results are you interested in, and you customize that list of lab results based on their medical record. It just opens up a lot of possibilities there.
Okay. And can you randomize variants, for like A/B testing many times you want to randomize?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of options there. Like you can randomize. The A/B test can work on altering the URL. For A/B testing, I recommend altering the URL for the test. So what it does is someone hits the form and then it will randomize and update the browser address bar to say you're using variant A or variant B, because that kicks in your analytics software really easy. Very, an intuitive, easy way for someone to get it. And that's an option you only turn on. Like for some forms, you don't want to let people in the URL bar select their variant. And it works well with Webform nodes, where you can go to a Webform node and say, I want this Webform node to render company A's form or company B's form. And then you're turning off that URL pre-population.
It's funny. I go back in my head to all those forms that people have created over time that has like the select box at the top using the conditional logic, like which department are you looking to contact, right? And like you could easily do that with a variant form now by saying like, okay, like if they clicked on the service department, obviously they want to talk to the service department. Just give them the service department form, and vice versa.
It's a really good best practice with form design to try to figure out what is that key question that will then simplify the form for all your users. And yes, conditional logic is definitely a way to do it. The other part, which is nice with variants, is you can have multiple variants working together. The example would be you could say company A has 2 types of form. It gets really complex. I got to be honest. Like and what's good about the complexity is there's a dedicated page to show you all your variants at once, and then you can actually use the drop down and say, I want to test this variant. I want to test these 2 variants together. The example would be you might have a company and then 2 different types of forms. Let me think if I can give you. Well, with appointment forms, you might want to say, do you want an online appointment form or do you want an in-person appointment form? And you can get one form doing all this functionality. I don't see a lot of people using the feature. I see people who have really complex web form instances going, I don't need to keep copying the form over and over again.
So of the 3 features, we've mentioned today, are they all available now to try out?
Yes. But they are all still marked as experimental.
Okay.
It's a little challenging for me. Is like the Webform module is stable, but I'm adding these features that I need to just flag as experimental just in case I need to fix a few things.
Okay.
One thing I will say.
What's your advice to people that want to use an experimental submodule of yours or experimental feature?
When you update it, make sure to test it.
Okay.
Oh, and read the release notes to make sure something hasn't changed. In a lot of ways, one thing I did with cards is I made all the JavaScript very encapsulated and not customizable. And the reason I did that was I wasn't sure what tweaks I needed to make. And my hope is I'm going to actually gradually improve the JavaScript while maintaining the existing functionality, but then you'll have like events that you can, like for example, you can't write custom JavaScript that figures out when you're moving between pages right now.
Okay.
I don't have an event that says the card has changed, and I've got to sort that out. I kind of wanted to let the module sit there for a little while.
Right. See how people are trying to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, and also when you open up those things, then you're making commitment to support them.
Right.
I've learned my lesson. Add a feature and you're like, I got to support that forever. That was a mistake.
So with Drupal 9 released in June here, well, that was last month already, right? Yeah, a month ago. Yep. What kind of challenges did you have, or are you still having with web forms in Drupal 9?
It was a challenge to get to where we are now, which is we have an alpha release that, frankly, is pretty stable. The biggest challenge for me, well, there was 2 challenges. One was converting all the simple tests to PHP unit. That was a monumental challenge because we were using, and just to figure out how to bridge the 2 and migrate them over and keep I have a lot of tests. I have like 500 tests running, and basically every single element you see rendered has a test behind it. That was just monumental amount of work. And then I had written an article, I think it's titled "A Bump in the Webform Module's Road to Drupal 9" a year ago, talking about. So we've said it a lot. Like from Drupal 8 to 9, we're removing deprecated code. So gradually over the past few years, we've fixed a lot of deprecated code in the Webform module. But there's this challenge where services, which is like little pieces of functionality that are they're reusable pieces of functionality that you inject into your plugins or how Webform renders, and those can change and get deprecated, and they became very hard to remove or fix. So I had to re-architecture how I instantiated all the classes, all the objects in the Webform module to make them compatible for Drupal 9.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was a patch that I worked on for a year. Literally, as we were going through, I kept updating all the constructors, and I documented the change really well. And it will break. That's why we have a new version of the Webform module, because it's going to break anyone that extended any of the plugins in the Webform module and extended the constructor.
Okay.
And by the way, to back up in the article, I emphasize in Drupal, constructors are generally considered internal. You're supposed to inject new dependencies outside of the constructor. There's tools for that. So that was the big patch that I had to get committed. And that was committed. And then there's a ticket. I think it's called like meta, brackets meta Webform 6.x. And you'll see the 30 or 40 issues that we're trying to, most of them are done now, that I committed to the 6.x branch. Some of them are just compatibility issues. Some of them are improvements that are backward breaking compatibility issues, where I didn't want to.
So what's your roadmap look like to get to beta?
I think there's 3 issues where we're just trying to sort out fixing some weird accessibility behaviors, and I can get to a beta. And I'm hoping by the end of the summer, and maybe it'll be sooner. What is nice is 5x and 6x are very maintainable for me. So the approach, and it's a really tricky one, is I am still working actively on 5x, and then I merge 5x into 6x, and I fix if there's a conflict, which makes it possible where I'm not really maintaining 2 code bases. And I'm hoping to keep that going for a long time.
So I think that brings, the next question I have is, have you had a chance to look at Drupal Spoons?
I listened to that podcast. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
I think it's great the direction we're going to, support forks and pull requests. And with GitLab, I think the idea of leveraging their tools makes a lot of sense. For me as a maintainer, I have limited bandwidth to start experimenting with new things. And I generally, I'm doing all this work in Webform, so I like to follow the community's approach and not get too bogged down with new tools. The example would be, I didn't have a lot of JavaScript testing in the Webform module until the community sorted out what was the right JavaScript testing framework. And now we're starting to add a lot more JavaScript tests as it moves along. But I did not want to start thinking too much about that. It's also not my expertise. And to be an honest statement, I'm not that into DevOps. I don't love it. I don't want to think about it. I think it bogs me down because there's so many tools out there, and I just want to write the code. So I'm not I have full respect for Motion, Drupal Spoons, and I think people who are more comfortable with that stuff should be experimenting with it. But for me, I'm going to probably stick to what's on Drupal.org and let it sort itself out.
Makes sense.
So I think your concern would be that Drupal Spoons doesn't really pick up, and you're working on something that the community at large doesn't use, right?
Yeah,
but once the community moves to the merge request workflow with GitLab, Webform will be migrating as well, I imagine. Absolutely.
Whatever I'm comfortable with whatever they go with. I just don't want to start thinking about it.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
And the patch system is, I'm used to it. There's this great folder in the Webform module. I think it's called notes or docs. And it literally has my cheat sheet for all the Git commands for dealing with patches. And how to re-roll patches and do interdiffs really quickly.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of listener questions that we want to share with you, and these could be kind of like a little bit of a rapid fire lightning round here. So from Josh, he asks, "What are you talking about at DrupalCon? Possibly web forms?"
Yeah, I keep still doing these web form presentations and just trying to approach it from different angles. And the challenge for me is I write enough blog posts and other stuff where people who are using web form can they're up to date on what's going on. So I keep doing general presentations about web forms for people new to Drupal or new to web forms, and just trying to put different spins on it. And this presentation I've been working on for the past year, and it's called Web Forms for Everyone. And I decided to take a different. So I've done presentations where I literally walk through all the features of the web form module, going from screen to screen, like not overwhelming someone, but just being like, this is how it works. And this presentation, I'm taking the approach of, hey, if you're a site owner, this is what you might want to think about with web forms. If you're a site builder, this is what you might want to think about. And for developers, I think, John, you might have saw my presentation where I'm like, this is the cool stuff, because we're developers, that you really want to know about and you don't know about with the web form module. And I'll give a hint about it. I think I wrote an article about it, is like you can leverage some of the coolness in web form modules in your own custom forms. Some of all the elements and feature, like those.
Oh, really?
Elements. Oh, yeah. And I've invested a huge amount of time on this element that allows you to kind of create composites. So you can create I need to get a bunch of data working together and create a little grid of data, or I need to select a bunch of nodes with some extra data on it. And you can reuse that in your custom configuration forms. And in the presentation, I show how to do that. I actually wrote a helper. Basically, you can take any web form and export it into a custom configuration form. And
Jacob,
then
do you think it's time to have a web form certification process so you can become a web form engineer? This thing does so much stuff, right? It's like every time I've seen one of your presentations, I'm like, oh, yeah, it really does that.
There's now a fourth contextual menu level for feature XYZ.
It's interesting because I was going to say, like, go to the DrupalCon talk because you are going to learn something. You're going to pull something out. Even I think I've seen Jacob speak. I don't know, a handful of times, say 5 times, and every time I'm like, oh, you can do that with web forms? I'm like, huh, all right, cool. All right, next question. Still from Josh. Are modern JavaScript frameworks going to force web forms to go headless?
I think it's going to force Drupal's admin UI to go headless. And then I don't know how that will play out with web forms. I'm going to make an honest statement there that when that happens, it will be similar to what happened when we went to Drupal 8 and web forms kind of stalled because it was like a complete rewrite. And the maintainer, wasn't, that there's a whole history there, right. But that's a massive effort. And the community has to just recognize that can happen. And I'm okay, I'll make a statement where I don't have to be the maintainer of web forms forever. That's how it works in the Drupal community. And we'll see how it plays out. I think, at DrupalCon, we're going to start having to have those discussions. What is Drupal 10 going to look like? Right. And I don't think it's going to be just removing deprecated code.
So that leads me to my next question from Josh. Should web forms be put in core?
No, that's an easy one.
Yeah.
I think core needs to improve its form API and possibly achieve what was hoped with contact forms. And I'm not criticizing anyone for it, but where Drupal's form API scales to the level where we don't need the web form module, where there's a way, and there's been some talk about it. It would be about decoupling how forms work, where you have a form and then you have the data. And in Drupal's admin UI, maybe the form builds nodes, but then it would be easy for someone to create a web form module using just core, because that form API is so thought out.
All right.
Makes sense.
So our next question comes from Joseph, and he's asking if you have any concerns about Webform being ready for Drupal 9 before the Drupal 8 end of life support in November.
Not in the slightest bit, because we're really at the point where there's like 2 or 3 bugs, and I just need to fix a UX experience. And anyone who's using Drupal 9 could say it's a drag to be like they could safely use the alpha version, but I have a history of supporting alphas really well. I think there's 2 caveats. Some alpha versions in the Drupal community, you're on your own. Like in Drupal, when you were on Drupal 8, when you were an alpha version, which I've done, when they change things, you're on your own to fix it. You have to figure out if your data's off or something like that. In the case of web forms, I would caveat alphas as you need to test your stuff. When you upgrade, that's all. You need to go to your forms and make sure they work as you expect. And if you can, write automated tests for your forms. So yeah, I'm not concerned. We'll have a good soon.
So I have one question. Is not really a feature request, but just one thing that it's something that I always assumed was just a checkbox in Webform. And then when I went to do it, I think I opened one of these issues. When I went to do it, it didn't quite exist. It wasn't hard for me to set up, but the e-learning client that I had, their requirement is that the web form, the user sees the web form, they see the data in the form, because we're styling in a certain way that makes sense. Yeah. And then they can edit that form as much as they want, but once it's submitted, the form is locked. They can't change it, but they still need to render it in the form.
Yeah, that's a pickle.
Okay. So, I mean, I found a way around it for listeners. What I ended up doing was setting it so that only one form per submission, or one submission per entity that it's attached to. But that requires the edit form permission, which means that they can always change it. And then I just created a custom handler that rejects submissions for things that are already submitted, and then applies a class to it called disables that we can then disable the form. So it renders in the form, shows the data, but the form isn't submittable.
Yeah, even as you were saying it, I was thinking in my head of all the custom code. Not all the custom code you would need to write. It's how easy it is to write that custom code. Because I mean, this is getting a little technical, but I think it's fun to dive into. Like, if you want to embed a web form anywhere, there's an element that's called #type web form, and that literally will just render a web form in any context that you want. And I think to solve your problem, that would be you'd create some custom controller. You'd create a custom endpoint, a route, and you just render the form there. Or you could go into the actual view of the web form submission and be like, oh, I don't want it to render the display of all the data. I want it to render the form and override that.
The 2 key problems I ran, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, the 2 key problems I ran into were, one, markup fields wouldn't render when I was getting just the response. So I like any of the helper stuff. And the second thing is things like radio buttons, like you could not get it, like it just wouldn't render the radio. And we built a scale that showed high to low. So you would just get the number 4 or 5 or whatever. But like I said, it's just one of those things. It was pretty easy to implement once I understood, but it's also one of those things that you look at Webform and you think, oh, that'll be easy. And it ends up taking a couple hours of work.
Yeah, the challenge for me is the joke here is I would reject that request pretty quickly because it's an edge case. And that's I've had to struggle with that where I want to listen, people come up with great suggestions where you're like, okay, that makes a ton of sense. I'm just going to do it. This one seems, it feels like an edge case, this very specific use case where
it is
would be like, oh yeah, people want to look at the data in the form as it was entered. And by the way, I also think it opens up those weird possibilities where you have to disable every element properly. You know,
it's funny because it is an edge case. Once you pointed that out, it's very clear that it's an edge case. Obviously, I've never tried to do it in 12 years. Yeah. But it's also one of those edge cases that you look at it. If somebody asked you if you could do it, without thinking about it, thinking it through, most of us would say, yeah, you can do that, obviously.
one thing you bring up is like this is a pitch. Like, there's a lot of examples in the Webform module. So like I mean, I'm up to dozens and dozens of examples of like how to create an element, a custom composite.
Yep.
And I did, start working on a snippets, recipes, and a cookbook with recipes and little snippets. But there's this need where, in a lot of ways in the Drupal community, what people want or need is like, how do you alter every single aspect of some module? How do you, like, where are the hooks? Like, okay, it's like a page where, how do I alter a web form? Here's the 10 different ways to do it. How do I alter, your question is, how do I alter the submission or the view display of a web form? And the other one that's a golden one, and we run into this all the time, is how do I alter the entity list builder? That's like the display of information in Drupal that's not a view. Where like you're looking at all your web forms and you want to make some tweaks to that list of web forms. And there's code snippets out there, but it feels like people constantly are asking that question and having to kind of do what you did, spend an hour or two searching for the answer.
Well, speaking of questions, Speaking of questions, listeners, if you have any questions or feedback about this episode or any other episodes, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. And now you can also reach out to us on the Drupal Slack with at Talking Drupal channel. You can also get show updates and our newsletter by going to talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. And patrons get access to the raw, unedited feed for the show.
Jacob, as always, it's been a wonderful conversation learning about what you're doing with web forms. In closing, is there anything that we missed that you'd like to mention?
Oh, no. I'm like looking forward to DrupalCon. I'd say personally, I'm looking forward to taking it easy this summer. There might be a blog post coming out, kind of a web form retrospective. Hopefully, I'm going to work on it all summer. Basically, like, where is web form at? Where is it going? And then on a personal note, it's like, where am I at? Where am I going? There's like two things going on. We all have that in the open source community. We have our open source projects, and then we have our career. Right. And they're not always. They're not one of the same. They're related, but you got to figure those things out. I miss seeing you guys at all these events, and I hope we get past this and we can start having in-person events again and sitting down and having steaks or not steaks.
Right.
Yeah. Now I'm hungry. We're recording in the afternoon. Steak.
Oh, we're all going to go out for our barbecues.
Makes me hungry.
I'm so looking forward to this.
So Jacob, other than tapping your shoulder at a virtual DrupalCon, how else can people get in touch with you?
I think Drupal Slack is one of the best places. That they can reach out and get web form support. You can email. I have a contact form for if you want to hire me to do some work. Twitter I'm not great at. I mean, I use Twitter just to kind of publish things. And if you need support and help, it's really Drupal Answers has just a very active community. If you post a question, someone's going to help you. And then if you run into a bug, always go to the issue queue.
Stephen, what about you?
You can reach me at Stephen Cross on Twitter. I'm not good at Twitter either, but you can reach me there.
Yeah, Stephen, you reminded me that my handle's Jay Rockowitz. Yes. That's it. I own it, except for another woman named Julie Rockowitz, and we battle for some email addresses here and there. But
are you willing to let go for $7,500?
Bringing it full circle.
Yeah, I do have the domain The Big Blue House, and I've gotten some offers for that because there's the bear and the Big Blue House and stuff like that. But I don't use that domain as much anymore.
Nick, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN, and we've actually had some activity on Twitter recently, and Steven's been poking me when people have been adding me, so appreciate the activity. Any questions, comments, happy to answer.
Interesting.
And I'll let Nick know whenever you tweet him.
As long as you tag
that actually
Drupal.
happens more than the listeners would believe. And as always, I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and on Drupal.org at John Picozzi, and you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Boom.
Have a good week.
It's great. So, Jacob, I was going to ask you this during the show, but I waited till after.
This is for the Patron people.
Yeah, so
we can have that discussion.
The last time we were face to face, you were telling me that your daughter was on this plant-based journey, and you were going to jump on with her to support her.
Oh, I stopped.
How did that go? How did she do?
She's still 100% vegetarian. There's no stopping this kid.
Right.
This is, my mom calls her a snurrer. She's like, that's a Yiddish term, I think. She's really a tough kid. So she's never. I would bet she's never going back to eating meat ever. She's just. And she's managed to not have the health issue. You know, like there's that risk when a young kid is not eating meat.
Sure. And
we got her to balance it well enough. And I think she's smart enough that as she gets older, she'll broaden her diet enough where this is it. This is her lifestyle.
Right. Wow, very good. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, she's an animal lover. I wasn't going to bring this up because, Nick, I know you have a dog, but I lost my dog recently.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's terrible, but like, it's very, okay, so and this is like the outtakes. So I went to pick up my dog's ashes today, and my daughter looks at me and says, "You're going to start crying." And I said, "No, I'm done crying," because I cried for a week. Yeah. And he was 16 years old. So, I mean, the line I sent to the breeder, I asked her to put us on a list for dogs. And I said, it was great to have such a wonderful dog to raise my kids and then to be cared for by my kids, because that's what the transition was. Lily was a baby when we had him, and now she and my 14-year-old was amazing in taking care of him. But the joke when I said to her when she said I was going to go cry about the ashes, I said, I'm done crying because I discovered that you can go on Costco and order anything with a photograph of your dog on it that you want. So I have like a collection of dog mugs coming. And I looked at her and I said, when I get upset now, I'm just going to buy dog stuff. And we're going to have like pictures by Ralph. My dog's name was Ralph, all over the house. Like I'm going to keep buying I'll buy t-shirts next. Yeah. So
I'm going to have to look that up because my wife lost her dog in Colombia like maybe 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to find anything that kind of memorializes her dog. So
mugs with photos on it is a good, simple, like I just went through all our photos and set it, did it. And, but it's great. Hey, 16 years was an amazing.
Yeah. That's a
run.
long time for
he had a good life. Yeah. It was, and he made it through. I mean, he got all the love during the pandemic. Yeah. I mean, that was like awesome for him. Like a house full of people checking in on him.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah. The pets are going to suffer as things start to open up again.
Well, the other crazy thing is there's a run on people adopting pets.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. And like with the breeder, it was really nice because I've had a relationship with her and be able to email her and just be like, yeah, if you can put me on the list. And she's the type of breeder that doesn't just give a dog to anyone. Right, yeah. So she's like, oh, no, done. Don't worry about it. So
do you
come Thanksgiving.
Do you think you're immediately ready to replace Ralph or have someone else come into the house?
You want to? Okay. I'll tell a little childhood story and I'll keep it as simple as possible. Yeah. My childhood dog, who I didn't have a great relationship with because I was a little obnoxious kid, passed. And my neighbors found a dog on the street the next day. And they asked my mom if she wants to adopt a dog. And my mom said no, because I understand. I'm not ready to have another dog in the house. But I, as a 12-year-old kid, met this dog and fell in love with it and created like a huge crying storm of how we should adopt this dog. And my mom capitulated and my stepfather made me sign a contract that I was going to take care and love this dog and walk the dog. It was like the day after her dog died.
Wow.
And
my goodness,
she caved. And that's where I'm kind of at. Like, I'm not ready, but it's kind of, I'm happy that it's not going to be for a few months.
Right.
And I think my kids need it more, I need it too.
Yeah. We had our first family pet was a cat that died 3 years ago. We had him like 15 years. And we thought when the cat died, there would be no replacement. Within a week, we had a new cat. It's just that hole you need to fill, right? You get that just the love you can give an animal, and it's just there to give to an animal. So
Yeah, and I took the attitude, well, if we get a dog, we get a dog. I mean, if my wife wasn't allergic, I'd probably wind up finding a dog on the street.
Right. Yeah, you gotta be careful,
and,
huh? Yeah.
Well, what's funny is I'm allergic, but I just don't care. I can adjust. Like I can't, when I bathe a dog, I get hives. And that to me is like, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
You know, I can live with that situation. Can't have a cat. That's impossible. Oh, wow. See, we got onto dogs here.
All right. Well, Jacob, thanks for the time. It was great to chat with you again.
Yeah, guys, I hope to see you soon and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
I mean, you're off. Everyone's off tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah, we're all off.
No, I work.
Are you working tomorrow?
I'm a freelancer.
Yeah.
I am too, but I'm just like, no, I need a day off.
I got a couple high pressure projects that are wrapping up in the next 2 weeks, so I'm working.
All right. Well, of course, Nick, if you need help, thank me.
Will do.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.